You are listening to OffPlantet Radio at offplanetradio.com.
Welcome to OffPlantet TV, OffPlantet Radio. I'm Randy Maugans. The websites are offplanetradio.com and offplanetradio.net, where you can find the live stream feed of this program during air times and other broadcasts as well. Over the last few weeks, I've had a strange series of, I guess you would say, synchronicities come upon a widening gulf in the UFO ET research community that began when I read two books. The first is David M. Jacobs' Walking Among Us, The Alien Plan to Control Humanity, and a recent release that's getting a lot of attention on the internet called Meet the Hybrids, The Lives and Missions of ET Ambassadors on Earth. The two books couldn't be more in stark contrast, and in the balance of their separate thesis lies a fundamental issue. Is humanity slated for an upgrade or assimilation? That question became more urgent and more controversial when Alfred Weber of exopolitics.com released an interview on June 14th called Hybrids Are Here to Help Humanity's Ascension. Learn to Stay in Your Hearts on his YouTube channel. Actually, to be fair, what Weber released was not so much an interview. There was actually very little critical thinking or questioning. It was, as Alfred later admitted to some of his colleagues, a promotion of the book on behalf of his friend, co-author Barbara Lamb. In his narrative, Weber describes something he calls the spin cycle, translated as the yugas, or long count Mayan calendar cycles, which Weber claims are shifts. Shifts or extinction cycles becomes the question. Weber calls his theory science in a Facebook chat message to me, but really it is an ancient Hindu theology of the cosmos and the seedbed for the mania around the December 21st, 2012, quote, ascension myth. Meet the Hybrids, The Lives and Missions of ET Ambassadors on Earth is by Miguel Mendonça and Barbara Lamb. Their website is meetthehybrids.wordpress.com. And Alfred Weber's article can be found at News Inside Out. We'll put links up with this video. In his article, Weber states that one of the more recent discoveries of the book is a reported extensive interdimensional ET hybrid project that has been organized by, quote, upper dimensional. Really? Upper dimensional? Who gets to decide that? Ethical, and we yet to see proof of that. Extraterrestrials designed to, quote, assist humanity in its ascension from third density soul frequencies to fourth and fifth density frequencies as part of humanity's evolution. This book, which is authored by Miguel Mendonça and Barbara Lamb, brings out some interesting questions and some interesting commentaries that we need to examine a little bit more. Miguel Mendonça background appears to be working as a freelance writer and researcher in sustainability and as a research manager for the World Future Council, an international NGO. He was a consultative council with high status given by the United Nations. He has also published a fiction work, Quick, Act, Normal, in 2013. And then in 2015, Mendoza published Meet the Hybrids, The Lives and Missions of ET Ambassadors on Earth. This book, as is quoted, explores the subject of ET human hybrids from the inside by interviewing 8 individuals who understand that they are part extraterrestrial and part human. That's sort of the nugget of the book. Mr. Mendoza has no record of being an ET researcher prior to this. His background is as a fiction writer, and that seems rather brief. His career track largely is that of a, quote, sustainability expert associated with the UN. Yes, the same UN espousing eugenics, depopulation, and a one-world government, that UN. Co-author Barbara Lamb, a licensed marriage and family therapist and a regression therapist who has for 25 years worked with over 1,700 clients with regard to extraterrestrial encounters. The book has been endorsed by journalist and frequent Coast to Coast AM writer and documentarian Linda Moulton Howe, as well as Mary Rodwell, who is a professional counselor, hypnotherapist, ufologist, and researcher. I will note here, Mary is also the founder of ACERN, Australian Close Encounters Resource Network, and is recognized internationally as one of Australia's leading researchers in the UFO and ET phenomenon. She is the vice president of Star Kids Project Limited and an advisory member of Exopolitics, whose research also explores the evidence from scientific, medical, psychological, and historical perspective to support what she believes to be, quote, a genetic engineering program which is part of an upgrade of Homo sapiens and creating a paradigm shift in human consciousness, which these children, these star children, demonstrate. So are we beginning to see the pattern here? The Alfred Weber interview and the appalling revelation about the yugas and the spin cycles comes up in this clip from Alfred.
One of the things that kind of startled me, not startled me, but because over the last several months, we've been studying the ascension process in parallel with coming across this book and your work, was the statement, and I think that you were surprised when you learned it, quote, only 1 in 7 humans will ascend. Now, that's a relatively small number, 1 in 7. I'm just wondering if you could talk a bit about that. That means that 6 in 7 are not going to ascend, which means that they're going to continue their journey in 3rd density. And as I understand it, at least through my parallel research, which is very rudimentary, but we've been able to tie it to what was called the Great Cycle of 25,800 years or so, 26,000 years. So once every 25,000 years in 3rd density, it's almost like a washing, like a washing machine. Oh, if you don't ascend, well, once more around in the washing machine cycle in 3rd density. And that this, you know, the great year ended somewhere around December 21st, 2012. Some people say 2025. You know, that's when the Kali Yuga is supposed to end. The great year is like the yugas, you know, you go from the Kali Yuga to the Satya Yuga. The yugas are like the great years. It's just a different way of looking at it from the east to the west, but it's still same cycle. And this is where the universe is really a machine for developing souls. So,
in our next segment, having seen that from Mr. Weber, in our next segment, we're going to explore the dark side of this ascension story, this spin cycle, with some critical data written by one of the leading regressionists and researchers in the field of ET-human interactions. He's a now retired professor who has spent over 40 years listening to what abductees tell him about an agenda. He is the director of the International Center for Abduction Research, ICAR, conducted over 1,500 hypnotic regressions with abductees. He's the author of UFO Controversy in America, Secret Life, Firsthand Accounts of UFO Abductions, and Threat. He is the editor of UFOs and Abductions, Challenging the Borders of Knowledge. He was a colleague of the late pioneering UFO ET researchers Bud Hopkins and Professor John Mack of Harvard University. The new book by David Jacobs is Walking Among Us, the Alien Plan to Control Humanity. And in his 1998 book, The Threat, Jacobs uncovered disconcerting reports about alien plans for the future of Earth. He reported that a change is coming, a future when very human-like hybrids would intermingle with humans in everyday life. Quote, soon we will all be together, the aliens said. Soon everyone will be happy and everyone will know his place. The book examines the disturbing phenomena that Jacobs began noticing in 2003. The alien integration plan has kicked into high gear. The incidents of alien abductions have accelerated, as have occurrences of alien involvement in everyday human life. A silent and insidious invasion has begun. Alien hybrids have moved into your neighborhood and into your workspace. They have been trained by human abductees to, quote, pass, to blend into society, to appear as normal as your next door neighbor. The book illustrates in detail the process of alien integration into society and the strategy and support structure that has been developed to make this happen seamlessly. While he is not certain why they are doing it, the final chapter of the book provides some chilling and possible answers as to why they are here and what they want to accomplish. The concept of ascension, as has been presented, has many expectations attached, including, for some, a mass consciousness escalation, a transition from 3D to 5D, Earth changes, some mysterious split between two Earths, or a pole-shifting, cataclysmic onslaught of deadly meteors, comets, and the ubiquitous Planet X, aka Nibiru. Ascension has become a byword for dozens of consciousness-raising fads, hundreds of books, and thousands of fanatical fear-mongering adherents, hoping that somehow they get an upgrade. Shift to a nirvana-like world, or mass ascend in a strange event that looks very much like the mythological Christian rapture. All of the above evades and avoids the difficult and slow-paced programs, hard work, and personal responsibility for one's own spiritual state and advancement. In short, this so-called ascension is a program designed to lull the lazy, gullible, spiritually undiscerning into a death trap that could, at its ultimate peak, create a near extinction event for humans and provide the fertile ground for an alien takeover of Earth and its inhabitants. The questions we need to ponder as we go through this video tonight, my interview with David, and also as we review the two books, which I would hope that you'll at least take a look at. The questions remain. Does humankind require outside help, a savior or saviors? Are we really the brute animals whom the aliens claim are a murderous, warring, mindless, bottom of the galactic food chain failed experiment? Are we being primed now to be assimilated by an ET race of insectilids who are roving planetary rapists? Do the unconsented abductions, harvesting of genetic materials, the cultivation of human alien embryos, the use of telepathic mind control, and the onslaught of superior technology against an unsuspecting human race lead to a denouement for organic humanity? The chilling aspect lies in our own unawareness and our complicity in staying silent. And with the quislings here on Earth who not only cooperate cheerfully with an agenda, but endures as necessary the ultimate conquest of the flawed but struggling race we now call human. The spin cycle, as Mr. Weber calls it, is little more than yet another culling of man, even as we strive to activate our own higher consciousness. The plan is espoused by the abductees interviewed in David Jacobs' book as part of a multifarious onslaught. Much like the cycles of destruction that befell Lemuria, Atlantis, and the antediluvian world of the Great Flood of Noah, some, such as myself, believe these extinctions were designed to mow down our ancestors at the very point where they were awakening. A change that forever wipes out human free will, cognition, and the natural evolution of human spirituality. The Mayan culture, which gifted us with the calendar wheel espoused as the advent of the New Age, ended in barbarism, human sacrifice, and extinction. If we are to advance now, in this present time, humans need to accept full conscious responsibility for each and every soul to make it their own arc in the future. Failing that, the alien forces, Dracos, mantids, insectilids, the greys, will overtake us. The great battle of the ages, the choice is still ours. Let's choose well and fully informed. And with that, we go to the interview with my guest for tonight in the next segment of OffPlantet TV. Welcome to the segment of OffPlantet TV. I'm Randy Maugans. The website is OffPlanetRadio.com, and you are hearing us or seeing us probably over Conscious Consumer Network out of the Netherlands, and please do support free and independent media. We're going to go back to roots here. This show began in 2009, and my mission then was to begin exploring the world of UFOs, ET abduction, paranormal experience, black operations, and the whole spectrum of things that now are covered widely on the internet, but in 2009 were really still just kind of bubbling under the surface. And for me, this is a return to a subject that's kind of personal, it's kind of deep, it can be very dark, and yet at the same time, there are things that we need to be aware of in the world and the spectrum of ufology. And my guest for this program tonight is a special guest. He's somebody I've really wanted to talk to for a long time. He is a retired associate professor of history at Temple University, specializing in 20th century American history and culture. He began researching the controversy over unidentified flying objects in America in the mid-1960s and has amassed over 38 years of primary research data and analytical hypothesis on the subject. In 1973, he completed his doctoral dissertation in the field of intellectual history at the University of Wisconsin-Madison on the controversy over unidentified flying objects in America. This was only the second Ph.D. degree granted involving a UFO-related theme. A revised version of his dissertation was published by Indiana University Press as the UFO Controversy in America in 1975. He continued with his second book, Secret Life, Firsthand Accounts of UFO Abductees, published by Simon & Schuster, and the book is still considered to be the most complete exposition of the structured meaning of the abduction phenomena. 1998, and this is his CV, and we're going to kick it here. In 1998, The Threat came out, published by Simon & Schuster, and it addresses important questions about abductions and clarifies issues that have been the subject of much speculation for the past 50 years. In 2000, he published the edited book, UFOs and Abductions Challenging the Borders of Knowledge, with 10 expert authors writing about UFO and abduction phenomena with the academic community as the target audience. The book is one of the few about abductions and UFOs ever published by an academic press. He has lectured on the subject of UFO abductions at universities and colleges across the country. In 1989, he delivered the first paper to a scientific organization about the abduction phenomena at Cornell University. In 1992, he participated in the first session on UFOs at the History of Science Society in Washington, D.C., in conjunction with his colleague, Bud Hopkins. My guest, Dr. David Jacobs, has been working in the area of ufology now for over 40 years. He's an advocate, a strong advocate of strict scientific and ethical research methodology, and he has given a series of workshops for members in the mental health community in methods of abduction, hypnosis, research, and therapy. And we can go on forever with his CV, but I think the best thing to do at this point is introduce our guest, Dr. David Jacobs, Ph.D. Welcome to OffPlantet TV.
Oh, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
This is, for me, kind of a really meaningful interview on a number of levels. You did point out to me before we went on camera tonight that somehow or another, this is your 100th interview in the course of discussing the book that we're primarily going to talk about tonight, which is the current book, Walking Among Us.
Yes, well, it's my 100th interview and or talk somewhere. So I've given a lot of talks as well. But it's been a fairly busy time for me, I must say, since September 1st, 2015 until now. And I'm looking forward to a respite where I can just sit around and watch television.
Absolutely. So I guess to paraphrase a really old term, what's a nice kid like you doing in a strange place like this? How did you wind up not only just doing UFO research, which, quite frankly, I think many people have been involved with because they involve themselves at the level of the craft and the sightings and the photography, but to go as deep as you've gone into the experiential aspects of ufology, where did it all start?
Well, I got interested in UFOs in 1965, and I got extremely interested to the point of being obsessional starting in 1966. And by 1967 and 68, when I was a graduate student at the University of Wisconsin, I had joined the Aerial Phenomena Research Organization and the National Investigations Committee on Aerial Phenomena. And for APRO, I became a field investigator and went around studying Wisconsin and looking at sighting reports and all that sort of thing. And I stuck with sightings throughout my whole lifetime, essentially, until 1982, when I was introduced to Bud Hopkins. And Hopkins, of course, was doing abduction research, which it didn't look askance on it, but I was not a great believer. And so once he began to show me what he was doing and how he was doing it, and he introduced me to abductees and all that, I got interested in the subject. In 1986, I started doing my own research into it using the techniques that Bud had developed. And I've been doing that ever since 1986. So it's been 40 years, essentially, for me, just doing abduction research. I'm sorry, 30 years just doing abduction research.
At what point did you begin to pursue doing, I guess, hypnotic regression and working with individuals? We'll probably refine terms as we go along here. I'm using the term experiencers largely because it's a loosely accepted term. But when you began working with people who were clearly, let's say, traumatically affected by something they perceived as being contact.
Yeah, it's interesting you should say that about the word experiencers. It's a non-word. You know, it's like I was having some soup and I dropped some in my lap and it was the worst experience I ever had. I'm an experiencer. And the word contact has all sorts of other meanings. There were the contactees of the 1950s who were all charlatans. Howard
Adamski.
Contactees. Yeah. Had dinner on the moon's surface with the king of the moon. The air there was the same as you could breathe here. And people went to Venus and they went to Uranus. These were the contactees led by Professor George Adamski, a title bestowed upon him, as he said, by his students. And he worked behind the counter at a four-stool luncheon cafe on Mount Palomar in California. So that gave him an authority, you see. So the fact is, though, that those were contactees, and now I see in my old age that the word contactee is coming back into vogue again, and they obviously don't remember what contactees were. I use the word abductee because it accurately describes exactly who these people are. There's no doubt about it. I hate the word abductee. I hate it. I can't stand the word.
Yeah, I do too.
Hopkins and I tried to figure out another word that would fit the bill. We couldn't do it. No. So we just stuck with abductees. And so, it's a problem just of nomenclature, essentially. However, abductees does, in fact, describe what happened to the person as opposed to having experience or having contact or something like that. What was the first part of your question that I totally avoided and ignored?
Well, wherever you went on the tangent, basically it had to do with how you began to work with people who had expressed traumatic experiences as a result of, okay, here's another word, I'll use this for the time being, interactions with something we would say is extraterrestrial or alien of origin.
Well, I started working with them in 1986, and I quickly made up my mind that I would work with the people who needed me most. Some people have abduction experiences, and it's okay. They don't mind. It's all right. They don't remember it. I'm not going to upset their lives. Some people build structures around it in their own minds that they can live with. That's fine. Some people have great difficulty with it. It's intruding on their lives. They're obsessing about it. They're staying up all night long with a gun in their hand. They are frightened all the time. They can't sleep at night at all. Yeah. I tend to work with those people more because I feel that I'm getting their lives back in order just through them knowing what's happening, and that knowledge then becomes something that they can deal with. It's not happening surreptitiously. I mean, it still is happening surreptitiously, but they understand that they know it, and they can come as many times to me as they want. I don't charge any money for anything. In fact, every time somebody comes into my house, it costs me a considerable amount of money just having transcripts made. But that's part of the deal as far as I'm concerned. And they, after a while, they'll give me a call and they'll say that the car is in the garage and they can't come to the session that I'm going to have with them tomorrow. And when they give me that call, I know they're not coming for any more sessions. They're done with it. They want to get on with their lives. and I figure I've won a victory. And that's fine. That's great. That's wonderful. They know enough about it, and they know that they've got a life to live, and they don't want this life to the abduction phenomenon to be a sinkhole into which their life goes. And so then they're happy, and I'm happy.
So in the middle of all of that somewhere lies the people who are clearly haunted by what's going on. And frankly, probably people who have spent years, decades in some cases, struggling with something that sits at the back of their memory. And yet, my experience both as an interviewer and somebody involved in this area is that those memories do emerge, but even when they begin to emerge, the memories themselves tend to be rather fragmented and fractured. Is that what you discover when you begin working with someone, that they are not, there isn't a linear narrative?
Yes and no. There are some people who remember an entire abduction. That happens. Mm-hmm. It's exceptionally rare.
Yeah.
Most people's memories are interesting, as I point out, and they might be fascinating. Are they true? That we'll find out. My sense is, having done a lot of abduction, work, is that I've learned that when people remember things, it's almost always wrong. The problem is this: all communication on board a UFO is telepathic. So what's to prevent a person from using their own memories and thinking that they're coming from the aliens, for example, and telling me that the aliens told them, fill in the blank, you know? And so I get this all the time, and the answer is, that's very interesting. Let's see. Then when they begin to remember it, oftentimes it is completely different than they thought, completely different. The aliens didn't say this. This event that they thought had happened did not happen. They're abducted, and they can describe the abduction event, but what they remembered is something totally different. So I've learned over the years to be extremely careful with conscious memories. There's something called confabulation, where people confabulate dream material and popular culture maybe, and other stuff, and they come out with an abduction narrative. And I've learned that that this is, we have to be very careful of how to proceed, and most people learn themselves that what they say is not necessarily true. Conscious memories have the most amount of confabulation, as it's called, than any other memories. You'd think it would be the opposite. Conscious memories, well, heck, how can you argue with that? If a person consciously remembers being abducted, well, it must have happened exactly the way they said. The answer is, confabulation is at its greatest in conscious memories. So, and I've done this hundreds and hundreds of times in terms of going through conscious memories. Now, these conscious memories oftentimes are the most important things that they think about, because that's what they remember. So it becomes a major event in their life. Therefore, I only do a conscious memory after 4 sessions with somebody. Once they get used to hypnosis, which is BS if there ever was such a thing, and once they get used to being relaxed, and once they get used to the kind of questions that I ask, which are chronological and logical. And I ask questions basically about what they tell me. And once they learn how to do that themselves, how they learn how to think that way, they then when they go into the conscious memory, by that time, they understand right away that there was a problem in their own memory. They get it immediately. Would you like me to tell you an example?
Sure, yeah, please.
A woman, she's about 52 when she came to me first. I dealt with her for a number of years. Remember that when she was a 12-year-old girl, she went outside into her backyard, and I've said this on other shows, so I hope I'm not repeating myself too much, but it's a good example. And she's 12 years old. She suddenly had this tremendous urge to go to the bathroom. It was too far away from the house, so she she did her business right then and there in the trees, by the trees. This was excrement. So when she looked down there, she saw a tapeworm in the middle of the mess, so to speak, to her amazement. And to my amazement, as she was telling me this story. So we did a session on it, and she went on the back, and she was playing in this wooded area, and suddenly there was this UFO there, and they took her on board, and they did this to her, and that to her, and this to her, and that to her, and this to her, and that to her, and then they let her go. And then she went home. And I said, well, Maxine, you said that you had to go to the bathroom and you did so by a tree? And she said, no, I don't remember that happening. I said, well, what about the tapeworm you saw? He said, I don't think that happened. So, you know, but that was a stark memory since she was 12 years old, for 40 years or whatever it was, that was her memory. And so, and suddenly she realized it wasn't a memory, it wasn't there. That's confabulation.
Do you find that generally once you bring these memories into alignment, other memories begin to line up? Do they begin to integrate memory streams in a way that even the confabulation sort of sorts itself out?
Yes, they become aware of confabulation very quickly, as I pointed out to them, and or as they point out to themselves, like not like saying that these things didn't happen, but they basically they learn how to answer. Because I ask questions that are logical. So if somebody says that they're in their bedroom and they wake up and there's a light on and coming into the window, the first thing I ask them is, why did you wake up? What woke you up? You should be asleep. A light. I said, then they say, well, there's a light. Okay, well, I will ask a purposely misleading question. This is a standard incandescent type light that's lighting up your room, isn't it? It's asking for a response, and they say no. It's just a shaft of light that's not lighting up the whole room. So I talk about that, and they'll say, well, there's somebody in the room, you know, and I'll say, well, this person, because they didn't say alien or anything. Where is this person? Is he near you? Is he far away from you in the room? No, he's near me. Well, is he down by the foot of your bed or the side of your bed or the front of the top of your bed? Whatever. You know, he's got to be somewhere. No, he's standing next to me. Okay, what happens next? So then they say, well, they're getting me out of bed. And I'll say, well, how are they getting you out of bed? Are they just helping you up? Or are they pulling you up? No, they're just helping you. That's logical and chronological, starting from the beginning. Then they walk over to the light. And this happened early on, this event I'm going to tell you. Walk over to the light, and the person says, I'm going with this other person with this, well, let's just say an alien. I'm going with this guy out to the window and up into the, I say, whoa, wait a minute. Let me bring you back again. When you get to the window, do you open the window? Open the window? No, they don't open it. Well, do these aliens, or the alien, or the guy next to you, whatever they said, does he open the window? No. Well, does the window open by itself in some way? No, I think I'm just going right through the closed window. Now, the importance of that is, if this were psychological, and this is a phenomenon that is either real or psychological, there's nothing in the middle. There's no mistakes. You can't make a mistake in this, like you can make a mistake with seeing a UFO and it turns out to be a plane. You were mistaken, you know. But with this, it's psychologically, it's happening in your brain, or it isn't. There is no reason on this earth to say, of course I opened the window. There's no reason not to say, of course I opened the window. Not opening the window is a barrier to belief. It doesn't make sense. Well, how do you go through a closed window? You know, everybody says that. Nobody has ever told me that they opened the window. and they all know how crazy it sounds. I once had this woman who asked me, I think I'm going right through the window. And then she said to me, has anybody else ever reported that? Not knowing that I already had hundreds and hundreds of these. And so that's proper questioning. That is proper questioning. And now sometimes they don't remember the beginning of the episode, and so they'll just open up into the middle of an episode. There can be proper questioning for that also, which has to do with questions like, let me back you up a little bit. You say you're in a room with tables. Can you sort of remember walking into the room and seeing those tables, walking close to them? And I say, well, yeah, I sort of remember walking into the room. Well, I say, well, when you walked into the room, did you turn right into the room? Did you go straight into the room? Did you turn left going into the room? That backs them up just a little more. And they say, no, I think I was in a corridor, I turned right. Well, if you were in a corridor or a hallway, was it dark in there or was it light in there? Oh, it was light. Well, was it really wide, like a ramp or like a roadway or something, or was it narrow? And they can remember, oh yeah, then I can back them up in the corridor. You see what I mean? Then I get them to where they're getting their clothes off to the various rooms and so forth. It's just logic.
Now, there's a phenomenon that's called screen memory that's widely discussed, and I often wonder if the images that initially come into the conscious mind are the result of either induced or somehow the brain itself is creating some sort of cognitive dissonance with these screen memories. What do you make of these in terms of how they may occur and how you break through a screen memory?
Well, you have to remember that the phenomenon is clandestine, and therefore they're not to remember anything. They're not supposed to remember anything. So when they do remember things, it's oftentimes bits and pieces, but the mind doesn't work that way. The mind works logically. So consequently, the mind will put together some sort of a narrative, which can be called screen memories or whatever. But in fact, what it is just bleed-through memories that people have attached their own ideas to, perhaps unbeknownst to them. For example, the two women, this is a case that Bud Hopkins had, two women were driving down the road, and both of them saw an ambulance and an automobile disaster there in the road, and they stopped and they got out, and then something happened to them, and they both remembered seeing the auto accident, and there wasn't any auto accident there. You could call that a screen memory because two people had it, and so but they shouldn't have remembered. Neither of them should have remembered it at all, because a person is abducted. It's intergenerational. A person is abducted from the time that they are children all the way into late adulthood. And they are abducted over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. It is not a 10 abductions in a lifetime. It could be 500 abductions in a lifetime. And I'm underplaying it by saying that. I'm underplaying it. It could be 1,000 abductions in a lifetime. So anyway, the point is that they're abducted all the time, and they don't remember any of it. And if they do remember things, they'll remember a couple of incidents. When I start working with them, it's like my colleague Eddie Bullard at the University of Indiana said, it's like the gates are opened. And out comes these other memories of abductions and more and more and more, as long as we keep working together. And if I stop working with them for a couple of months and they come back, they don't remember so much anymore. It's like the gates close, and I have to start almost.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. So they keep coming as much as they want, But the fact is, though, that a memory is a touchy thing. And for me, I have no memory. I don't think. I think I used to have a memory, but I can't remember if I had a memory or not.
I want to go back a little bit here. The generational component of this is something that I've looked at extensively in the interviews that I've done with abductees over the years. And it seems that almost infallibly somewhere there's a family connection. Tell me a little bit about that, where you think that evolves from and what the markers are of it.
Well, it's intergenerational. That means that if you are an abductee, your mother or your father or both, if that's the case, were abductees or is an abductee. We can, by doing that, by knowing that, and once again, a lot of these things are first discovered by Hopkins, but by looking at that, we can tell with a certain amount of reason how old the phenomenon is. If you go back through the generations, and you can only go back a couple of generations before you lose it, before it becomes just family stories. So, but we have been able to date it back with very little certainty to the last quarter of the 19th century, because there was a UFO wave there, the great airship wave, and Bud Hopkins did a session with a guy who was a kid in the 1920s who was an abductee. I did sessions with two women who were abductees in the 1930s when they were children. So each time we do this, it becomes more solid. So we can, and by the 1940s, abductions are all over the place. But the fact is, though, that we can date it back with some certainty to the 1920s, not much, some with less certainty to the 1890s, with a lot of certainty to the 1930s. When I was doing research at the Aerial Phenomena Research Organization in Tucson, Arizona, Jim and Carl Lorenzen's organization, I read a letter that was in their files. And it was a letter from a guy who was written, I don't know when. When I read the letter, it meant nothing to me. The letter was, in 1917, I was 11 years old. And my parents took me to my grandparents' house, a farmhouse, it was a Sunday or something like that. And he got bored and he went out into the back area. It's a wooded area there, and he was fooling around and he wandered into this wooded area, and he saw a large silvery object on the ground with three small people staring at him. So he turned around and he ran home, and they ran after him. And he beat them home, and that's what the story was, and he thought they might be interested in that story, period. There's no embellishment, no nothing. It meant nothing to me until I started thinking about it just a few years ago, and I realized, well, this is abduction stuff. Once that kid is there, that UFO is there for a reason. It's just not a chance meeting. He turned around and ran. I can agree with that. After the abduction was over, he forgot all the middle stuff. They didn't run after him and he beat them. That's just not going to happen. They don't do that. The environment is controlled. People are controlled. And so but that was an abduction account from 1917, which lends more credence to the last quarter of the 19th century.
Absolutely.
See what I mean? Yeah. So we can date it. So it's not that old. I think it starts somewhere. Now, how it starts, we do not know. I have one person explaining something to me from a hybrid. I've never heard this from somebody else, so I can't really go with it. But whatever happened globally. Most people don't fully understand the concept of this being global. It is an international phenomenon.
Yes.
We are not the center of the abduction or UFO world.
Not at all.
And consequently, the effort to begin this phenomenon must have been phenomenal, fantastic, extraordinarily huge on a global aspect. And consequently, as a result of that, the intergenerational aspect of it came about, as it is in all countries. I have explained this many times, but I'm going to explain it again. There are three pillars to the abduction phenomenon. Number one is intergenerational. Number two, it's clandestine. It's secret. Number three, it's global. It's global. It's only free to remember, and I only remember two. It's global, it's intergenerational, and it's clandestine. Those three things are the major aspects of the phenomenon itself. When we get to what these beings can do, how they think, and things like that, then there's a whole nother world of information. But the three big ones to help us understand what is happening are those three things: intergenerational, clandestine, they're secretive, they don't want anybody to know what they're doing, and they're global, it's, it happens around the world. You put those three things together and you think, this does not sound so good.
Now, given that it's generational, to the largest extent we can extrapolate, is it also bearing markers of genetics and biological aspects as well? In other words, can we profile abductees as being genetically marked in some way or bearing traits that would be physically discernible?
We do not know what markers there are. There has to be something, because abductees are abducted no matter where they are. It doesn't matter whether they're on a trip to Timbuktu, they'll still get abducted. These beings know where people are. Now, having said that, here's the story in a nutshell. An abductee who I worked with for a number of, for 10 sessions, for a number of sessions, went down to Costa Rica to visit his sister. He was abducted. I asked him, when you're on board this UFO and they're walking you through this room of tables, do you see what kind of people are there? Is it just sort of a mixed group, here, there, and everywhere and all? He said that he thought he was the only non-Costa Rican on that ship, so to speak, on the UFO. And I said, well, what about the beings? He says he did not know any of them. They didn't feel familiar to him at all. So what happens here, what this suggests, and what we know about for a long time, in other ways, is that these UFOs work in area. And so they'll work in a neighborhood, and they'll go to another neighborhood and that sort of stuff, but they don't go to other countries necessarily. But that person is in a foreign country. Let's say it's in Romania or whatever, and there's information that he is there that is spread to another group, and they can find him easily in ways that we do not know. But there has to be something there for them to find him. There has to be some sort of marker in some way. Now there's something else, and that is the whole aspect of telepathy. All communication on board a UFO is telepathic. Telepathy is not part of the normal human environment. If it was part, if there were all sorts of people out there, let's just say 1% of the population that were truly telepathic, we would live in a completely different society. And we would know this for centuries. There would be that telepathic aspect of humanity that we would know about. It is not known. It is not there. We don't know it. And people think that they know what's going on in another person's mind, and 99% of the time they don't. So, but therefore, there had to be some sort of receptor, some sort of change in a person's mind in some way, and I don't know how or why, which allows them to communicate telepathically. And we don't know whether this happens with people who are not abductees, because they usually don't get abducted. And if they are abducted, it's with an abductee in a car, for example, when the whole car is taken up. And oftentimes the people in the car will just stay in the car and sleep. But whether they are telepathic on board, we don't know. Now that would be interesting, because that means that telepathy can reach non-prepared humans, which means that there isn't a marker. Now, having said that, enough abductees have told me over the years that every once in a while, maybe once a year, if that, they'll come back from an abduction and they're still telepathic, and they can tell what's going on in other people's minds.
Yeah.
Now, there's two problems. Well, the first problem is, number one, they don't like it. They don't want to interfere. They don't want to know what's going on in this other person's mind. Number two, when people tell me that, sometimes, every time, they don't run up to the person and say, were you just thinking X, Y, and Z? And the person says, how did you know that? That's never happened in terms of abductees. So they can't really check it. However, there's been enough instances of this where children have talked to their parents and parents have talked to their children over a long distance, that across a large room, for example, where this telepathic ability still exists, and then it trails down and out after about a week. Mm-hmm. It's a vestige that the aliens forgot to stop. The vestige of it still continued while the person was not on board anymore. But so these questions are great questions. I wish I knew all the answers.
Well, and that's kind of the whole point. You remember, I'm coming at this both as an interviewer, but also from an experiential standpoint. So I'm trying to tap in for my listeners as well. My audience I get a lot of emails. I get a lot of information from people who will never do interviews, but they want to talk to someone. They want to share information. So going back for a minute into the issue of the telepathic senses that emerge, is it possible that the aliens are simply turning on something that is presently turned off in the human mental processes selectively so they can communicate and then tamping them back down again?
It is possible. And I hope that's the correct way. But then again, if that were the case, I think that over the last 100,000 years, we would have discovered that people are telepathic in some way or another. And it just hasn't happened. It hasn't happened. And the key thing here is that when people think that they're, as I said, that they think that they're telepathic and they're not abductees, they have to test it. They have to check whether or not that person was thinking of X, Y, and Z or not, and people don't usually do that. I know that people have said that they're telepathic, and they talked with me and on and on, and I would say things in my brain that would be embarrassing, and I know that they are not hearing. They're not hearing it. It's not there. I don't see them cracking a smile. I don't see them shrinking back in horror. Nothing. So, recently there's been a move by some researchers to think that they have found hybrids living here, and these hybrids have agreed to come up on stage with them, and they answer questions from the audience.
Yeah.
And I've said to these researchers, this is what you got to do. You have to think of something and have the so-called hybrid tell you what you're thinking of. Just think of something simple, like the color blue. Just blue, 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 and imagine blue in your, and see if they can come up with it. You're helping them, And they've never done that. Never done that. They don't take those simple. I mean, it's.
You've kind of walked into something here. It's an external conversation that I have with a group of people, but let's go there for a minute, because we're seeing interjected into not just the UFO community right now, but what I will call the metaphysical, spiritual, New Age communities.
Right. Would you say the first few words you said, you broke up a little bit and I didn't quite get?
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. We're seeing the introduction into not just the UFO community, but also into what I call the metaphysical, spiritual, New Age community of it. What I think is an acceptance of hybrids as hybrids are being presented, and being presented outside the context of what you classify in your work. And I will not be more specific. I'm going to do a narrative on this in another segment where I talk about this. But what I want to ask you is this. what is being presented as hybrids right now are largely people who suddenly someday realize that they're hybrids. They've been living here on Earth, normal lives. Most of them seem to report maybe difficult births, maybe strange births, but they do not report experiences of living on ships in the way that your witnesses report in your books. So I'm curious to know, in identifying what I consider to be a hoax, are we looking at a plot right now to modernize and popularize the idea of hybrids into the popular social communities as an entree to bring on actual hybrids? Or is that just my paranoid rantings?
It's paranoid rantings.
Okay.
Here's the thing. A lot of researchers on this subject aren't as rigorous as I am, let's just say. And I wish I could be even more rigorous, to tell you the truth. And I'm not putting myself up as some sort of iconic figure. But they tend to accept anything that an abductee says or anything that anybody tells them. Their critical abilities are not fully developed, let's just say. And I sound terrible in saying that. But I think that's the correct way to say it, because it's better to be critical and wrong and right than uncritical and wrong. And so first of all, abductees would never, ever, ever strike that. Hybrids would never, ever, ever go along with being paraded in public.
That was my point. That was my point. Thank you. Yes.
It's the exact opposite.
Yeah.
They don't want to be known. They will go to great lengths not to be known. They are subservient to the lords and masters above on the UFO. So we have to be careful with that. Let's put it that way.
No, and actually you answered the question, and you answered it the way I had hoped you would. I want the information to have rigor to it. I want people to be discerning. I want people to examine evidence from the best possible standards and not just accept what's being published in pop culture literature out there, which is, some of it, quite frankly, is just exotic woo-woo.
Yeah, the problem here is that there's no way that people can learn about how to do this subject other than by just doing it themselves. And doing it themselves is very chancy, depending on what their background is and what their how they think, and whether they're metaphysical or religious, or not religious and not metaphysical. I mean, all these things kind of intrude upon their analysis of what's being said, and they have to get away from that. You can build a certain amount of information about the subject. You can go with that information and be critical, even of abductees, and be most of the time correct. And if you're not correct, every once in a while, that's just part of the deal.
Yeah.
But it's a mess out there. It really is a mess.
Yeah.
I've tried to train a few people to do this work. There aren't a whole lot of people out there who do this, but I've tried to train some people, and it just, here's the problem. You can't get a 20-year-old guy or woman to do this work. A person who's 50 or 60 years old is not going to tell a 20-year-old or a 25-year-old the intimate details of their personal lives. Not going to happen. Particularly the sexual stuff and all that. Not going to happen. Mm-hmm. They have to get somebody at least in their 40s. The problem with getting somebody in his or her 40s is that they already have lives. They have careers. They have kids. They have whatever it is that they have. Why would they want to destroy all that, and possibly by going into the abduction world of all things, and doing that? I was extremely fortunate in that I had my career and my UFOs at the same time. I was able to do it primarily because I had tenure.
Mm-hmm.
And not only that, but Temple University had a union, professors union. So we had a union and we had tenure, and nobody ever complained about me in the history department, in terms of the history department people saying we're not going to do this, we're not going to do that, we're trying to get me out. That nothing like that ever happened. What did happen was that I lost raises because they didn't think that UFO books were worthy of a raise and pay. Everybody else gets a raise and pay if they write a book. I did not. When you go to work as a university, you're an assistant professor. That means a professor without tenure. Mm-hmm. 6 years later, the faculty votes whether or not you get tenure or not, and then you become associate professor. The next step up is just plain professor, and that's called full professor. Right. And each time you get a substantial raise and money and all that. I knew going into it that I would never make full professor. That was never going to happen, and I was right. Never happened. So you have to sacrifice something, and that's what the sacrifice was. But when people, but people sometimes when they stop doing university work and they're still relatively well, they're old, but they're not like me. Like my brains are dribbling out of my ears. But they can be taught to do this too. But by that time, they're set in their ways, and they think UFO abductions. What are you, crazy? And so it's a tough one. Most people who do this kind of research are now certified hypnotherapists. The problem is that it's a mixed bag. It's a very mixed bag, even with certified hypnotherapists, because the abduction phenomenon is not standard hypnotherapy. You have to know what to ask and how to ask it, and what comes next, and what the person is skipping, and things like that. You have to learn that. And they don't usually bother to learn that. Not only that, but they have a certain amount of time that they can do it. And the abduction might last 4 hours, and they've got an hour and a half, or something like that. And then, so you're only going to get a smatter of maybe incomplete and maybe even erroneous stuff that they don't realize. In other words, more people have to learn how to do this, and I don't know how to get them.
To that end, you are currently working on a book that's going to go into your hypnotherapy technique. Is that correct?
That is correct. I originally thought that I would price it at an outrageous price because I know it's going to have to be self-published, because right now the audience for this book is in the tens and tens across the country. So I figured I'll charge $100 for it, so only professionals will buy it. Mm-hmm. Then I thought, nah, I'm just going to charge $10 or whatever it is and let everybody buy it. Let's just see what happens.
Well, I think
that's my latest thought.
I think the goal is to get this out and find people who are motivated, interested, and qualified to do it. And, to that end, I'm hoping that you and I are going to talk here in the future about some of that, because that's a separate conversation in itself. This is a field that requires a specific type of study and a specific type of discipline. We are at the 45-minute mark, and we're going to take a break, just 5 minutes. Okay. The tape runs in this period of time. I'm going to put a window up, and this is where we go into the music and midsection of the show. So we want to grab something to drink, stretch your legs, and we'll reconvene in 5 minutes.
I come to this magnificent house of worship tonight because my conscience leaves me no other choice. I join you in this meeting because I'm in deepest agreement with the aims and work of the organization which has brought us together. must undergo a radical revolution of values. We must rapidly begin the shift from a thing-oriented society to a person-oriented society, when machines and computers, profit motives and property rights are considered more important than people. The giant triplets of racism, extreme materialism, and militarism are incapable of being conquered. We are now faced with the fact, my friends, that tomorrow is today. We are confronted with the fierce urgency of now in this unfolding conundrum of life and history. That is such a thing as being too late. Procrastination is still the thief of time. Life often leaves us standing bare, naked, and dejected with a lost opportunity. We as a nation must undergo a radical revolution of values. We must rapidly begin the shift from a thing-oriented society to a person-oriented society, when machines and computers, profit motives and property rights are considered more important than people. The giant triplets of racism, extreme materialism, and militarism are incapable of being conquered.
Welcome back to OffPlantet TV. I'm Randy Maugans. I hope you enjoyed the segment there, the music and the video. We're back with Professor David M. Jacobs. And in this section, I'd really like to drill down, David, into the hybrids and what they are, what they represent within the spectrum of the abduction experience. Talk a little bit about the books, where you've discussed this. And I want to get into some of the details about the hybrid specifically, because we're dealing again with a phenomenon where there are more than, let's say, one actor. We have what appears to be some kind of structure, hierarchy, intelligence. We have a top layer, which appears to be mostly hidden. You call them the insectoids, the insectids.
Insectoids, that's what I call them.
Okay.
Nobody else calls them that.
No, that's fine. You get to create the terminology because you are the guy with the long record in this field. And I'm fine with that.
Well, I'm going against tradition, though.
Good. We like that. We need to break tradition. We need to break off all the conventions, and we need to get down to it. So, go ahead, please.
You're asking about hybrids.
Yeah.
What we're looking at in terms of the abduction phenomenon as a whole is a workforce that is working for one goal, and that is to create hybrids. And not just hybrids, because there's a spectrum of hybrids. There's hybrids who look quite alien, but not. Who there are hybrids who look sort of half and half alien, half human. There are there are humanoid hybrids who look human, but their eyes are too big, or there's no facial hair or bodily hair, or things like that. And then there are human-looking hybrids who are human in every way except for their brains. They have one-track minds. They like security hybrids, as I call them, and they only think about security and nothing else, just security, period. That's all they're programmed for, and that's what they do. And then there's what I call human hybrids, and I put the two words together and just call them hybrids. And their job, their task is to live here. And that is the partial goal of what the phenomenon is all about. It's the first part of the goal, obviously. The goal is to create these hybrids, or human hybrids, who live here and who have perfectly normal brains in every conceivable way, except one small, hardly noticeable way. And that is, they can control us neurologically, and we cannot control them. All abductees and all humans within a certain range of the abduction are controlled neurologically. In other words, if you are in a car and you are going to be abducted and you have 5 people in the car, they will take you out and not the other 4. The other 4 will just sleep. They are neurologically controlled to just go to sleep. The same thing when a wife is about to be abducted, or a husband is about to be abducted, and they try to wake their spouse. I've had people kicking their spouse hard, trying to wake them up, and they're not going to wake up. The environment is controlled neurologically. When I said before that all communication on board is telepathic, that is control. That is true. But when they are here, walking among us, if I may use that phrase, they talk orally. But when people discuss the situation of helping a hybrid move into an apartment, how to set up their furniture, what to do with this, what to do with that, what this is, what that is, on and on and on and on. And everything is fine, and they can talk orally, or if they're alone, they'll talk telepathically. It doesn't matter. They're not going to remember what happened, just like a regular abduction. They do not remember that they were off somewhere in a supermarket with a hybrid, with showing them what an egg is. And they're not going to remember that, even though they're just in normal surroundings here. That's neurological control. That is disastrous. I'm putting a light aspect to it. That is disastrous. There seems to be an animal here.
Well, hello and welcome. We often have cats drop in with us. I've had cats literally leap on the desks of guests. I've had cats show up in the camera. Cats are welcome on this program always because they're amazing.
Yeah, well, Carrie is the world's sweetest and smartest cat. And I've had cats all my life, and I don't say that about all of them, but she is. She's a wonderful cat.
That's awesome.
And everybody says, no, my cat is.
Well, we all say that, yeah.
They get to know Carrie for a while, and they realize, no, your cat is. What was I saying? So the point is, though, that the controlling factor is a killer. It's awful. It's terrible. It makes us a second-class species and them a first-class species. That's the problem.
No.
It's not that they're here because they want to be friends with us. They're here because they can control us.
And that is the dangerous part of it. Going back to the core subject of abductions, and I can't stress this enough because this is where I think some of the pop psych, I'll call them new age crunchy types, miss it. This isn't about meeting somebody and going off with them for a journey and having a wonderful experience. This is not something where you gave permission. And I've seen this, I'll say this, I've seen this danced around for years. There's a woman out there, she's now passed away, named Dolores Cannon, who is also doing regressions. Dolores Cannon's shtick was basically that we had a soul contract and that we just didn't remember the contract. Well, to that, and I have to say, if you can't show me the contract, if I don't remember the contract and you can't help me remember the contract, we don't have an agreement. That's law. As far as I'm concerned, it's universal law. It's law in every corner of the galactics, and it's law on heaven and earth. So the abduction scenarios are not permissive. They're not done out of soul contract. You did not make an agreement to come in here and be taken. Well, and if you made the agreement, wouldn't you just walk into it? I mean, this is some...
The concept of the agreement goes back a long ways. And people say, well, the aliens have come down and they have an agreement with the United States government, let's just say, and the agreement is that they will supply us with technology and they will then get to abduct people. And the answer is, they don't need no stinking agreement about anything. They just do what they want. They don't need to make it legal in some way. It's ridiculous. Not only that, they'd have to have an agreement with every country on Earth. It makes no sense.
Well, and it goes back into your core subject, what we were just talking about, the psychic control that they hold over us. You call it neurological control. I call it psychic control. They're basically, we're sort of like lab rats placed in a cage and then given ether so that we submit to vivisection or whatever operation a scientist wants to do on us. We're basically on that level, highly intelligent, sensate lab rats in this equation.
Well, there is that aspect to it in that we can't do anything about what they're doing to us. But maybe it's even more complicated than that. Maybe the reason that they can do pretty much anything they want is because of the fact that they are clandestine, that they just keep it secret from everybody. But at the same time, this has been going on for a long time. You'd think that scientists and academics would become interested in this eventually. That has not happened. In fact, it's almost the opposite. Scientists and academics run from this subject. It is just too much for them. It's too crazy for them. And the worst thing is that they don't even want to learn what it is. They have an aversion to they would rather be ignorant rather than learn, even though they're academics or scientists or whatever. And the question then is, can the best minds of our generation get together and figure out a way how to stop at least some of the abductions? For example, there's a guy named Michael Mencken. And Michael Mencken invented some sort of a hat with a polyurethane lining or whatever it is. And he says that it helps to prevent the communication, the telepathic communication aspects of aliens or hybrids or whatever, and it prevents abductions. He might be right. You can't wear this helmet 24/7 though, or this hat rather. You can't wear it 24/7. But abductees swear that it stops abductions. Now, the problem is that most abductees don't remember their abductions. So they don't remember whether it was stopped or not. That's it's not outside of the realm of possibility that one of these aliens or hybrids, you just come over and take the hat off. There might even be a struggle. Who knows? That would be interesting. But you can't wear it in the shower. Supposedly you're abducted when you're in a bathroom. You know, there's obvious. The point is, he's on the right track. He's on the right track. And if we could get large numbers of abductees to wear something, to do something, to be something, I mean, but this is a scientific question ultimately, and nobody's interested in it. Absolutely nobody. There is zero interest in this subject, which I consider to be the most important subject ever that we've ever found. This is an actual existential threat.
Yes, it is. Yes.
It is not like the atomic bombs. That's just a plaything compared to this. That's nonsense compared to this. This is a true existential threat globally. There's never been anything like this before in history. And let's just say it's not happening. Let's just say I'm barking up the wrong tree. Let's just say that there's something wrong with me and all my other abduction research friends and all that, and in fact, it's not happening. Well, if that's the case, and it's a global phenomenon, people all around the world say the same thing in the same way with the same aliens and the same this and the same that, and nothing else. They don't have other things that they all say the same thing about in terms of this bizarre thing that's happening. Then we've discovered one of the most important aspects of human mentality and cognition that has ever been discovered. You'd think that neurologists would be wrestling each other to be first in line to study this subject. There are none. There used to be two. Now there's none.
Yeah, this is sad. In the spectrum of people who are abductees, you obviously go through a screening process as a prelude to going through regression therapy with you as well. You have pretty extensive documentation on the people who have gone through this and who you've documented. This runs a pretty wide spectrum of people. These aren't assorted nutbags walking around out there, or the delusional or the psychotic. Because I've studied your work, I know that you have a pretty good handle on the type of people who experience this, and they represent a very wide spectrum of people from all over the populace. Talk a little bit about that.
Yes, I've worked with people who are psychiatrists who are abductees, psychologists who are abductees, university professors who are abductees, medical doctors who are abductees, people who dropped out of school in the 4th grade and never went back and could never find a good job after that, and everybody in the middle. It's the good, the bad, the ugly. They all say the same thing. It does not matter who they are. The only thing that matters is that they're human. And nothing else fits. And so you get this extraordinary situation where people who are psychologists and psychiatrists come to me, and they know that I could destroy their lives by making their names public. Psychiatrist says he was abducted by aliens from another planet. That's all you need. And so, but they are desperate to find out what is happening to them, and they trust me, and I have never betrayed anybody's confidence for as long as I've been doing this. And so they trust me, and they want them, and the reason is they are desperate to find out exactly what has been happening to them, because what has been happening to them does not fit into a paradigm that they have learned their entire lives. It doesn't fit into a model.
You talk about not fitting into a model. In the book, Walking Among Us, and I got to say that, you sort of started this book out with a little bit of hilarity in that we have one of your abductees going to a baseball game with a hybrid. Now, this is very strange, and yet at the same time, you have to smile. I mean, geez, they like baseball too, or are they trying to mainstream themselves? Talk a little bit about things like that everyday kind of experiences that hybrids are attempting to assimilate.
Well, what is happening is when hybrids are moving into the society, they're moving in two different forms that so far. They might be moving into more forms, but what I found is in groups of 2, 3, or 4 in apartments between the ages of 17 and about 23. And then they live together in apartments. Abductees come and help them and teach them how to do the furniture and things like that. Or independent hybrids who are moving in alone into apartments. They're usually a little bit older, like 23 or 24 or whatever, 25, whatever. They do not know their ages. If you ask them their age, they don't know how old they are because they've never had a birthday. They were not born. They were taken out of, well, I won't go into that. It's a little side, but all the hybrids are put into gestation tanks after about being in a woman's uterus for about 10 or 11 weeks. And then they're taken out of the tank. So they don't know their ages. But the one-on-one, the ones who are moving independently have an abductee with whom they work. Sometimes more than one abductee, which we don't know about, but that's my guess. And the person who's the abductee teaches them how to live in American society. That means teaching them how to drive, how to go shopping, how to, what television is, for example, how to, or should I say what a baseball game is, and how to cook, how to make beds. They have to teach them everything about being a member of society that you cannot learn on board a UFO. The UFO, you can learn a lot of things about what pets are and what we eat and what we drink and how we sleep and this and that. But being here and suddenly being involved in a rush of new things that you've never seen before in your life, or at least that suddenly you have to deal with, is very, very, very difficult. So abductees' roles now, at least some abductees, are to show them how to get along in the society. If somebody says, "Hey, how you doing?" You can't freeze and just look at them.
Right. This goes into the area of affect, of where I call it, this is the area we would call affect, which is basically the normal responses that human beings do
It's
in
talking
terms
to
of
strangers.
appropriate behavior.
Right. It's appropriate behavior, and you're just saying to somebody who is not really engaging you in conversation, but is just saying hello or whatever it is, and you have to say something. You just can't sit there and stare at them, or stand there and stare at them. You have to say something. And teaching them that is something you just don't learn on a UFO. It can't be learned.
I get the sense too, David, that the hybrids themselves. Now, another thing we need to talk about is that there are generations of these hybrids, that these hybrids were not, it appears as though they have gone through iterations, much like the development of computers or automobiles as a form of technology, where they've refined them to the place where they've got like the Mark IV model that actually looks really human without the big eyes and the disproportionate head and all of that. Talk a little bit about that.
You mean what hybrids look like? Or?
Yes, and how they've changed over time. In other words, there are levels. There's early hybrids, later hybrids, and hybrids that are ready, let's just say, for prime time.
Right. Well, I think I just did talk about that a little bit. But in fact, what we're looking at is all these different hybrids have tasks to perform on board. And the fact is that they are bred for those tasks. It's hard. Now, this is a tough one. The question is, are they just born that way and therefore that's what they do? Or are they created that way and therefore that's what they do? And I'm not sure exactly what it is, but I do know that early stage hybrids who really look strange take care of other hybrid babies, for example. And ones who look sort of half and half take care of hybrid young children. And hybrids who look more human-like will then take care of older hybrids, like 12 or 14 or something like that. So, and they have other jobs too. the question is, are they built for that, and that is their purpose? Or is that just because it's an accident of their birth? I'm leaning more towards built for that than anything else, but I can't be sure. I can't be sure. What we do know is that the final outcome is these human hybrids who are there, as one explained, his task, as he said, is to live here. That is his task. Why he should live here, he does not know. He does not care. His task is to live here. That's what he does.
He does not know, and he does not care. Now, so we're now dealing with something that has no self-directed intent and no, we would assume, free will in terms of the way humans think about this. We humans, most of us have some vague idea of who we are, what we want to do. We have a purpose where we grow into it. We have interests. It sounds to me like this is programming.
It could be programming, but their allegiance are to the ones above, as they say. They know that, see, here's the question. Supposing they move into an apartment, and the question is, what do they do late at night? We know that they do not sleep for 8 hours. They don't do that. So the question is, do they go back to the UFO at night? They might very well do that. We do not know, because we can't know. We can't know unless they say that, and nobody's ever asked that. So in other words, we don't know what the backstory is. Yes, they have an apartment. Yes, they got a couch. Now they got a television. They got a coffee table. They got a dinette set. They got a refrigerator. They get all this stuff. They have it. Do they actually use it? I mean, during the night, for example, or do they go back up? We don't know that for sure. However, my guess is that they are training to be here for the long haul, and that that's what their task is. And whether they go up every once in a while or all the time, I don't know. But their allegiance is to the gray. It's not just gray aliens. It's the ones who are in charge, and the ones in charge are the insect-like ones, the insectoids, or as I call them, the insectolins. You just take the word insect and alien, you put them together, and you eliminate one of these, and you got insectolin. And so they're the ones who I think give orders, and everybody else takes orders up and down the line. And yet, the hybrids, the ones who are living here, do have a sense of their own selves, and they are human. Yes, they can tell everything that you're thinking. Yes, they can control you. Yes, they can do things that we cannot do. At the same time, they have wants and desires and likes just like humans do. They can go against authority from time to time, like humans do. They can keep things from other beings if they want. I will be writing a book where this comes up. It'll be my last book, I hope. And where I will discuss this in terms of my own experiences, not because I'm an abductee, but because I was a researcher, and how this group of hybrids tried to gut me up, basically. And, they didn't get to me, but I had some very interesting discussions with one of them over AOL instant messaging, which allowed me to keep all the conversations. I have them all
Great.
And they are. I wound up having eight conversations with one, Jamie, if you read my book, and sometimes they were I think it was 8 conversations, sometimes lasting for 4 hours, starting at 1 in the morning.
Wow.
He was up at that time. You know what I mean? So if they sleep, it's a whole other world of sleeping. It's not like the sleep we have. I think they look at that as wasted time. And I think that their brains are modeled so that they don't need that replenishment, that resurgence. They don't need. We don't know. The brain is not. Their brains don't work like ours do, and so because of the telepathic aspect. However, they might sleep for an hour or two. We don't really know. But they are human. Having said that, the Nazis were human too. You know what I mean?
Sort of. Yeah. I mean, here comes. We'll transition off the Nazi thing because obviously, in all of this, you have to sense the sinister in the context of what we're talking about. First off, all of the things we talked about previously, we now go into a level of mind control that I don't think even MK Ultra has been able to simulate in their top shelf programs. And I could say that to some degree because I've interviewed people that came out of these programs as well. But now we're talking about total control of the human mind, the human movement, the human will, to the point where in your book, these abductees under the direction of hybrids, or grays are able to take a person and literally bend their will to do exactly step-by-step instructions, even to their own peril.
That is correct. Here's the situation to give you a background of that, I think. When I was born in 1942, in other words, a long, long, long time ago, there were 2.3 billion people on Earth. In the year 2016, there are 7.4 billion people on Earth. That is an enormous population growth, even with World War II. 60 million people were killed in World War II who could not then have kids or whatever. A large percentage of them could not regenerate themselves. But the fact is, though, that with 7.4 billion people, and this being an intergenerational phenomenon, that means that there has to be more help, more workers, more UFOs, in fact, because they do it 24/7 as it is. But there's so many more people to abduct, intergenerational. So what I think that this is that a lot of abductees find themselves being trained by aliens to do hybrid work on board the UFO. And in Walking Among Us, I talked about how this one woman was sitting there with a couple of other people and maybe some hybrids who were helping her and the others, searching for somebody to find somebody who might have lived in Colorado or someplace like that. And other people have told me similar things that they're. I recently had a case where this woman was learning to stare into other people's eyes and get them to do this or that, things like that. They're in other words, abductees now are having different jobs to do that helps that doesn't just lend themselves to the aliens, but helps the aliens with their work in an active way that they can't control and they can't do anything about it. And then it doesn't even occur to them to say no when they're on board. They're under control. So this is a form of conscripting labor. This is like a draft again at a level we can't conceive of, because you're not just seizing the physical body and abilities, but the mind and will itself. It's not just seizing the mind and will, it's training the minds to be more like an alien's mind. Strange as that may sound. And more research needs to be done, as they normally say. And I don't know if I'm the one to do it. I've done this for so long. I need other people to take over, But it's just the crush of people. there's so many abductees now. There's so many people on Earth. And you got to remember that this phenomenon started before I was born. So they started out low level, they started out small, and they've grown and grown and grown and grown. Now they've grown so much they're using abductees as part of their own workforce.
Is that part of a larger syndrome that you see occurring as more and more hybrids come into, we'll say they roll them out into the society, that we then begin to create the need for more labor, but at the same time, I'm assuming there's a breeding program in all of this somewhere with the hybrids, and I'm assuming that they intend to, let's just say, cross-pollinate with the human subjects, for lack of a better indelicate term.
Yeah, that certainly seems to be going on, but they have to be cross-pollinating with abductees. It's possible that they could cross-pollinate to non-abductees, and I don't know what the answer to that is. They might be doing that too, but in order to get a baby out of somebody, they would have to abduct her. So that would become see what I mean? There's a contradiction there. But the fact is, though, that their numbers are growing tremendously as our numbers are growing. But I think that they have taken everything in stride. They know exactly what they're doing. They've watched the population grow over the decades, and so they've got that. They know what to do, And the question is, are we the first people ever to have this happen to them? And when you take a look at the way in which they operate, the smoothness, the functioning of their functioning, the fact that the UFOs are outfitted for this phenomenon itself, everything on board the UFO is related. Well, everything on board that abductee is related to abductions. It makes it impossible for this to be the very first time that they've ever done this. And not only that, as I point out in the book, the error rate is there, but it's low level. There's a low level error rate. If they had started out in the beginning, early on, and what we find is people who would be dropping out of a UFO by accident and hitting the ground with a thud, and in the middle of nowhere where there's no place to fall from, and no airplane says that there was somebody who jumped from the plane. There wouldn't be anything like that, and that doesn't happen. We don't see those kind of major accidents happen. This is an extremely, extremely well-run operation. The possibility of this being the first time is not a possibility, in my opinion. And so, this is something that happens that is it might be quite it might be average in it might be happening all the time, I should say, in space there. This might be part of the deal if you have a civilization that you get invaded by somebody else and they take over. I don't really know. And what we don't know is huge. What we do know is small, but we know enough now to figure out exactly sort of what's happening. But we don't know any of the backstory stuff. We don't know who makes hybrid clothes. We don't know, now the clothes that they wear are clothes that they get here, but on board they wear special kinds of clothes. We don't know who makes them. We don't know what they're made out of, where they get those from. We don't know what they feed hybrids on board.
Or even that, we're assuming for a minute that these are ships that are in orbit around the planet, that they are self-sustaining vessels. I think in your book you call them purpose-built. They seem to be outfitted and designed to do rather specific things. So can we say that, just for the sake of extrapolating wildly here, they have replication abilities, they have the ability to do whatever type of manufacturing and creation they need to do to sustain their needs in that kind of self-contained environment?
Yeah, they probably have something like that, as opposed to other ships flying up to them and exchanging stuff, although for all we know that might happen. but they probably are relatively self-sustained. Yet at the same time, we know that they get stuff from Earth. We know, for example, a woman was given a bag of underwear. She had to dress one of the hybrids, and she could, when she was given this, the clothes all had, they had labels on them and stuff like that. You know, they were earthbound stuff that these beings had obviously purloined in some way. But they have to wear regular clothes when they're here. They can't look strange. They can't look out of sorts. They have to look average, and they go for the average. Everything and everybody is average. Average height, average everything. Somebody who's 6'4" is not going to be put down on Earth. Somebody who's 3'2" is not going to be put down on Earth. Somebody who has too large a nose probably will not be put down on Earth. Somebody who talks too loudly, probably not. They go for the average so that these people blend in completely. They know what they're doing. They're doing everything for a reason. There's an end game coming up eventually. I don't know when. I probably will not be alive when it does, but because time seems to be on their side, and getting old for hybrids does happen. They get old. The hybrids will get as old, have average ages like us, like we do. But the other ones in control, the insect aliens and some of the others, they probably don't have that border. They can probably go on for a long period of time, maybe even hundreds of years for all we know. So they are doing things at their own pace. They are not hurrying up or anything like that. And they've done this before. They know what to do.
So basically, this is kind of almost like the Borg from Star Trek: The Next Generation. In some way, it's an assimilation program. I'm using sci-fi examples here because I'm trying to pull ideas, but we don't know what the end game is. But what can we extrapolate from the data that you've collected from your abductees in understanding what they call the change, this eventual takeover?
I really do think that this is a takeover program. And the reason is because of the neurological control. They can't just live here and be good neighbors. If they want to take out the garbage, they'll get the neighbor to take out their garbage. I look at this as, to put it bluntly, as disastrous. I don't see the human race evolving a whole lot after this happens. These beings are all part of a program. They are controlled by the ones above. They are controlled by the insectolents. I don't think everybody focuses on gray aliens, but I don't. I don't think that. I think that they're just workers, mainly workers. They have other things they can do, but they're workers. How they're created, we do not know, but they do not have genitals, so they're not self-creating. Unless there's something at the tip of a finger or a nose or something that we have never noticed. But that's. I used to joke, maybe we don't know how they're created. Maybe they're stamped out of a die. You know. The answer is maybe they are stamped out of a die.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or it's certainly brewed up in some sort of laboratory somewhere, as some sort of. Years ago, I interviewed a group of people, including 2 Ph.D.s and a nobleman from Great Britain named Nigel Kerner. And we talked a lot about the gray aliens. And that was the focus of Nigel's work at that time. He was doing an open inquiry, but he described them as basically robotic humanoids based on his research. Yeah.
Well, they have, in that they are created to do a task. That's true. Do they have choice? Not really. But within their world, they do what they do, and sometimes they make mistakes, and sometimes they don't. And they work, from what we can tell, 24/7, but we don't really know because they all look alike, you know. So,
They do make mistakes, by the way. They drop people off in funny places, dress weirdly, sometimes not at all, sometimes really ripped up in adverse conditions. So, I mean, they don't seem to either care or know a whole hell of a lot about what humans' needs are either.
that's right. They make mistakes. Mistakes are made, but they're low-level mistakes.
Yeah, yeah.
And not enough to cause concern. I have one guy who I think I talked about, I can't remember whether I talked about him in Secret Life or The Threat, Jason, I think I called him, who was abducted at a dorm. He's going to one of the colleges here in Philadelphia area. And he found himself in the bushes hours later, wearing only his underpants. And he had to get into the elevator and go up to the 9th floor of his dormitory or whatever it was. And, and he pounded on the door and he woke up his roommate, and his roommate had to take it was locked from the inside. Mm-hmm. And his roommate said, how did you
get out? How did you get out of here? Yeah.
Right. He didn't jump.
No.
So he, there's things like that happen. That's a mistake. It is a mistake because it gives people the opportunity to wonder what happened, and and there's a problem there. The only person who knew about it was his roommate, and I'm sure his roommate probably told everybody, but he didn't tell anybody. So, but it's not enough to say we're being invaded. It's by that mistake.
Yeah.
Low-level stuff.
Low-level stuff.
If a UFO crashes into the Empire State Building, that would be a major mistake.
Yeah. Well, we're not really seeing that. And even the Roswell thing, I personally, that's a whole conversation in itself. I don't really go there anymore. It was, fun while it lasted, but hey guys, it's old. And this narrative is timely. It's now. We just have a few minutes here in our scheduled time together, David. And I want you to kind of nutshell what you're trying to bring out in the books. Conceivably, what can we do? How do, the questions are all over the place, but the takeaway for the work that you've done for all of these years.
I can sum it up in one word. Run!
I don't know if we can. I don't know where you run. That's the horrible thing about this.
I don't know what can do. As long as the academic and scientific community has not been able to put their brains together and still thinks about life in outer space as being, if there is life out there, they're creepy, crawly little things in the water, or else they're creepy, crawly little things who are not in the water. They cannot take the step of thinking of technology. If we have technology, there's got to be others out there who have technology, and that technology, and therefore they have the ability to come here because the technology that they have automatically, almost absolutely, has to be infinitely more advanced than ours is, because ours is brand new. So consequently, but they can't think that way for reasons that I don't understand. They don't go past creepy, crawly in water and that sort of stuff. Yeah. So as long as that's happening, and as long as they're paying no attention whatsoever to the UFO phenomenon or the abduction phenomenon, I think we're done for. If they do figure something out, it might be that the technology is so advanced that we're done for no matter what. Now, I'm making this dramatic, but I would like the academic and scientific community to take this subject seriously. It's the last thing that can happen. I'm not going to solve this mystery. I'm not going to figure out how to stop them. That's not going to happen. I can barely figure out what I'm going to watch on television. That's the extent of my brain power these days.
Yeah, I understand that. Listen, the one thing we all can do is we can be informed, and that means we need to direct people towards your work, your websites, obviously the book Walking Among Us, which is your latest work. And I highly recommend this book. It's a great read on so many levels tell people where they can find you, your work, anything that you want them to know.
Amazon.com or BarnesandNoble.com. Then go to my website, UFOabduction.com, and you can click through to Amazon from there. You know, you click on the book a couple of times, and suddenly you're at Amazon. But I'm not selling the book from my house or anything like that. You know.
Great. David Jacobs, it has been a privilege of mine to talk with you and interview you. I followed your work for a lot of years. And as somebody who traveled the path with John Mack and Bud Hopkins, you are one of the legends of ufology, in my opinion. And I know, it's yucky stuff, but I got to do it anyway. Anyway, we're going to wrap this show up. Again, the information about the books, if you're watching this on the replay, are down on the little box underneath the video. All the information's right there. You can find it. This is OffPlantet TV. I'm Randy Maugans. The truth is out there. And somewhere buried inside, it's inside you too. We'll be back again with another show very soon.